Well, good morning. Today is December 27th of 2024. Welcome to Fred Plotkin on Fridays on Adagio, the place where classical music happens. Adagio, as you know, is a video and audio streaming platform dedicated to supporting artists and to making classical music and opera available to fans all around the world. Today being our holiday program for 2024-2025, I have made some decisions. I always like to have someone really special as my guest for the end of year program. And my very first year of doing this show in 2020, I asked Frederica von Stade, would she join me? And she was still the best conversation I had with anyone in all these 4 years I'm doing this. And more people asked me about that conversation than any other. And although it has been my rule not to have anyone come back, I want Frederica von Stade back. So she is back, and I am so grateful to her. Uh, you know her as a mezzo-soprano, wonderful artist. The word that's always attached to her is beloved. I don't know if that's annoying, but it's you are beloved genuinely by people in the opera world and people who follow opera. And we have people watching all around the world. And there's really no one that I wanted to see out 2024 with and welcome in what I'm optimistic, because we always have to be optimistic, will be a wonderful 2025 for as many people as possible. So Frederica von Stade, also known as Flicka, thank you for coming back.
Thank you for having me back. I'm so honored and tickled and thrilled and always so happy to see you, Fred. Always,
Likewise. Likewise.
always.
We are joining each other from each other's homes, which are quite a distance. And the peg, let's say, on which I'm hanging this conversation, but it does not require a peg, is that you have a new recording out. And I gather that you intend that this be your last recording. Are you definitive on that, or would you
Oh
be open?
yeah, don't you think?
No.
This might have even been pushing it, but I was so thrilled to be invited to do it, and I had such a good time putting it together with this. It's a wonderful piece. The whole piece, I've heard it now a lot. It's so thoughtfully constructed. It's so exquisitely orchestrated, and I am absolutely in love with all the poetry that Joe has chosen. It's very special, and it means a lot to me. That he asked for me, and I was so unsure of my vocal state that I recorded it first and said, "Listen, you can't hurt my feelings. If it's not good, just we'll go out for lunch sometime." But so anyway, he let me get away with it, and I had the time of my life, as I always do.
I just want to check his surname. Joseph is his first name. Is it Turin? Turin?
Turin.
Turin. Okay, like the city,
Yeah,
but with two R's.
yeah,
Turin.
yeah.
And he is the composer. And the piece is called Crimson Roses, and we'll discover why in a couple of minutes. And it is a collection of songs, of poems, really, largely from the World War I era,
Right.
known often as the Lost Generation. And, in reflecting on that term, I realized that unfortunately we have had other lost generations since. We don't call them that because it was not World War I, but there were
Right.
lost generations in Rwanda, for example, or Cambodia and China and Russia and Ukraine and Gaza and Israel and Jews in Central Europe and really all over the world, unfortunately.
Exactly. In equal, if not greater, tragic situations. Yeah.
Sudan as well right now. I forgot to mention that, but Bangladesh in 1971, there are just so many. And when I think about these generations, apart from the tragedy of the deaths and the loss, I think of it as a blackout. So, for example, in Italy, where I spend a lot of time and I've learned a lot about the culinary culture, they had what I call a culinary blackout, where young Italians who are now in their 60s and 70s were not interested in the older traditions. And they just sort of lost the knowledge. And I became very passionate about the knowledge, bless you. And I decided to learn everything I could about Italian food culture.
Sorry. Yeah.
Salute, as they say in Italian. And so that now Italians read my books about Italian culinary culture because they were not documenting it in the 70s and the 80s.
That's
And
so
a few other
interesting.
colleagues of mine, but not Italians. They were all
Yeah.
Americans and British from elsewhere.
Right.
And we sort of documented all of that stuff that now is being rediscovered by Italians. And
Is it pasta oriented?
well, my first book was the pasta book. You know, the title is the authentic pasta book. My title was Pasta Diva, but they didn't want that. But I've done regional Italian cookbooks and histories of ingredients, especially Liguria and Friuli Venezia Giulia. And so that I recently went very deep into one dish, which is a focaccia with cheese that got all over the New York Times. I didn't write it, but my advocacy for the dish was such that the Times picked it up, and then it was picked up by the Italian media, and now suddenly there's this ping pong about this dish that they're now trying to reintroduce to New York. And but the point is, we can live among these things, and not just food, but music and art and every cultural pursuit, but also scientific knowledge. And if we sort of ignore it and there's a blackout, and then if people die or lose interest, we lose that knowledge.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I'm very concerned, you know, in the latter part of my life, what I'm most concerned about is the preservation of knowledge and ideas. And frankly, one reason I began Fred Plotkin on Fridays was to talk to people such as yourself, and not only, mostly musicians, but not only, about what they do, what they think about, and what they care about. Because one day we won't be here, but these videos will be here, and we can document what people thought about. So you and I will talk about music today that's based on poetry from more than 100 years ago, the
Right.
First World War. And, but I hate the word relevant, but it is as relevant today as it was in 1918.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Oh, Fred, I think of all the your gifts to humanity, really. And I don't mean to just sit and compliment you, but they are really to be admired and treasured. And I'm very grateful for it. And
I appreciate
I'm going out to get the focaccia recipe as
that.
soon as we get off the
I'll send
air.
it to you. I'll send it to you. But anyway, I know that one of the poems that became the music that Joseph Turin wrote music for is a particular favorite of yours. It's called Perhaps. So if you will indulge me, I will read that poem,
I would
and
love that.
then we can talk about it. I'm not the
Okay.
world's greatest actor, but we'll try. So Perhaps, and the subtitle is To R.A.L. And the man it was written to was named Roland Leighton, but the poem is by Vera Brittain, and it was written in 1916, and he died in 1915 in battle in World War I. Perhaps someday the sun will shine again, and I shall see that the skies are still blue, and feel once more I do not live in vain, although bereft of you. Perhaps the golden meadows at my feet will make the sunny hours of spring seem gay, and I shall find the white May blossom sweet, though you have passed away. Perhaps the summer woods will shimmer bright, and crimson roses once again be fair, and autumn harvest fields a rich delight, although you are not there. Perhaps someday I shall not shrink in pain to see the passing of the dying year, and listen to Christmas songs again, although you cannot hear. But though kind time may many joys renew, There is one greatest joy I shall not know again, because my heart for loss of you was broken long ago.
It's really amazing. Yeah.
Beautiful poem. When I read it earlier today aloud, I noticed that the first four verses, stanzas, kind of match in their rhyme. They all begin with the word perhaps, but the last one is entirely broken. And that was very affecting to me. And it's very affecting in the music that you sing because there are commas in different places. It's all disjointed. The word again, which keeps appearing, appears in a different spot in the sentence. And she says, because my heart for loss of you was broken, comma, long ago.
Right.
And that comma is beautifully expressed in the music and the way you sing it. And so where do we start with this poem? What
Well,
does it mean to you?
well, it has a very special meaning for me because my father was killed in World War II, and he was killed when they were newlyweds. My mother and they were born in my mother was born in 1918, and they were I wasn't born yet, and he was the love of her life. And so I feel that I lived this poem because I lived through the rest of her life with her, and it was always a very large absence, you know, a more severe absence for her because she knew him. My brother and I didn't know him, so we didn't know what we were missing. But it was very much part of her character, that constant, 40-year long ache. What I love the word in this poem, perhaps, and it's not a word that we use very much anymore. We've sort of substituted maybe, but perhaps is a gentler word and a more dignified word, and it is no stronger in what we can surmise, but it makes the delivery of her pain and her sorrow and her loss possible, because the perhaps puts it in a way that she can live with it, and we, as listening to her words, can listen to it. And I feel that Joe Turin said it so beautifully with repetitions, with a sort of anguish in volume of, I really hate Christmas tunes. I hate them. They bring up something for me that is intolerable. But that's the only time. Everything else is, the fact that she wrote it a year after he was killed too, that perhaps gives a little bit of a window into the future, and that hopefulness is the way the piece ends too, musically.
I did some research about Vera Brittain, the author. Brittain is the spelling of her name. And fascinating life, as one would expect. She was born in 1893, December 29th. Her birthday is coming up. She died March 29th of 1970. And she was born in Newcastle, but the family moved around a lot. And she was very close to her brother. And I found it interesting because I know you and your brother are close, and therefore there was this story here too. Her brother Edward was really her only friend as a child. And through him, she met his friend, Roland Leighton.
Right.
And the RAL in the poem. And what we later come to learn about her brother is that he was gay, or as the term was used then, homosexual, and probably had a crush on Roland Leighton, but nonetheless understood that his sister would also be drawn to him and that Roland Leighton apparently preferred women. And Roland Leighton and Vera Brittain began a relationship in 1914. So they were quite young, actually. They were teenagers. And she began studying at Oxford, but then she left Oxford to become a volunteer nurse. It was called the Voluntary Aid Detachment. And these were civilians who provided nursing care. And she went to France to do that. And for most of the war, she did that. Roland Leighton and Edward Brittain both served in the British Army in World War One. Leighton and Vera Brittain corresponded, and we have some of the letters. And when he was on leave in August of 1915, they became engaged at the age of 20. And on December 23rd, so basically 4 months after, he was killed in a battle in France. And that was devastating for her. And that was when she redoubled her efforts to support the war. She believed that the First World War, she said she believed the propaganda and that it was a
Right.
noble end, and that she was all for the war in action. And her brother died in Italy on June 15th of 1918 in the Piave, which is the Northeast, one of the biggest
Right.
battles.
Yeah.
Hemingway wrote about it, and Hemingway wrote about it in Farewell to Arms. And so that was a double blow for her, understandably, because the two men she was closest to died by the time she was 22 or 23. She later got married to a gentleman, George Catlin, who was a political scientist and a philosopher in 1925. And she became a very committed pacifist in the 1930s. And she
Okay.
rejected the whole concept of patriotism and the noble war effort and so on, and became very active in pacifistic activities. So much so that in World War II, she remained a pacifist, but she was the kind of pacifist who served the nation in other ways. And she was a fire warden in World War II.
Really?
And with Benjamin Britten, about whom I was thinking, and similar name spelling, Benjamin Britten was also a pacifist. But what he and his partner, Peter Pears, did, they were living here in New York, but they got on a ship and crossed the North Atlantic past Canada and Greenland, and very dangerous, and arrived somewhere, I think either Liverpool or Glasgow or somewhere in the northern part of the British Isles, and got on a train. And for the rest of the war, Benjamin Britten and Peter Pears made music throughout the country because that was their idea of service, because they were pacifists.
Yeah.
So there was that in common. I don't know if they ever met. I would love to know if Vera Brittain ever met Benjamin Britten.
Right.
But then Vera had a child whose name was Shirley, and Shirley married a Mr. Williams. And Shirley Williams became an incredibly famous politician in Britain, probably more famous than her mother. And she was a Labour member of Parliament and was education minister, and then taught government and politics at Harvard for many years. And she's the person who drafted the new constitutions for Russia, Ukraine, and South Africa, believe it or not. So all of this came out of Vera Brittain and out of that war experience and the different directions it took. But Shirley Williams was a very formidable person.
He was. Yeah.
And therefore, you didn't mess with Shirley Williams. But what's interesting in my research about her, she was in every way a liberal, whatever we think that is, but she was not for same-sex marriage and unions because she felt that marriage was about procreation and that's it.
Right.
And therefore, her uncle, whom she never knew, the brother of her mother,
Right.
I wonder what he would have been able to say about
They
that.
took- yes.
But it's so interesting because what war presents, not only, but certainly war does, is the what if. What if so-and-so had survived? What
Right.
if this country had found a peace agreement?
Right.
What if Dresden had not been destroyed? What if Liverpool, London had not been destroyed?
Right.
What if Japanese Japanese Americans were not interred in California?
What if we'd never dropped the atom bomb,
What if we never dropped the atom bomb? There's
Right.
an opera about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dr. Atomic. So, where art intersects with politics and reality, people say, oh, I don't want to talk politics. It's not about declaring a position. but it's about how art can help us understand the emotional impact that many people either can't access or won't access.
Or won't access. Right. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. And um, it shows us the everyday effects of decisions that people in charge make.
Yeah.
And, I say as a little bit of a joke that everything's going to be fine in this country because, look, the Romans survived sort of. Um, so the history is we go to war, we kill each other, and then we reconcile, and there's peace for a while. And then we go to war, we kill each other, and then we reconcile. And that seems to be what human nature is about. And the way that human nature is explained the most accurately is through film, music, poetry, painting. That's when we get to understand it. And what we're understanding is not the process, but the fabric. It's who we are. That's what our human nature is, and I love that you researched her future because we know that she had a future. She didn't lock herself in a room and cry. She produced a powerful woman and must have been the foundation for many of that woman's ideas. And there's a sacredness to the idea of pacifism. It's unreal. But it's authentic, and I think, what do we do? I love that Peter Pears and that they went around and made music everywhere.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
4 years.
That's what we do. That's what we are given to do. The musicians, the artists. That's what we do, is inform, entertain, enlighten, bore, all of those things,
But I always feel that, I would like to take politicians of all parties and of all governments, Mr. Putin, if he's willing to come out. I'll take Mr. Putin to the Mariinsky in St. Petersburg and just play a lot of Russian opera for him. Never mind all the others.
Right.
And just say, let's talk about Boris Godunov. Let's talk about Khovanshina.
Right.
Let's talk about Eugene Onegin.
That's
and
the best idea
to talk about
ever,
the ideas.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all we need.
Right.
Because if you get them to talk, many of these people, and again, I'm not taking a position right, left, or anything like that, but all these people across the spectrum, if you were to take them into an arts performance and not ask them to analyze, but just to feel, to experience.
Right.
And then once they're coming out of it, with Putin or Queen, I would love to take him to Queen of Spades.
Right. Yes, of course.
The Russian nobility and Catherine the Great. All of that is in that opera. Because never mind Boris Godunov about the troubled Tsar and all that means. But, I think that there were certain composers, Mussorgsky certainly, Verdi especially, Wagner, Mozart, Beethoven, Berlioz, who were very hooked into the political issues of their times. And even if they didn't talk about politics, they spoke about what people felt. To me, one of the most political operas of all is by Rossini. And it's not William Tell or Semidamide, it's L'Italiano in Algeri, which is a comedy.
Right.
But it's about Italian identity. It's about pensa la patria, think of the fatherland.
Right.
Think of your home. Think of who you are, what it means to be an Italian at a time when Italy was occupied. And without that, I don't think Verdi would have been able to do Nabucco. And his great Rossini came close. It was written the year 1813. All of Europe was at war. Verdi and Wagner were both born that year in times of war. But we don't think of that because, for example, interesting, I didn't think of this, Wagner's father died when he was an infant, and he never knew his father.
Yeah.
I never thought about that till just now. And therefore, the trajectory of his life changed because his mother had to move from Leipzig, where he was born, to Dresden. And that set him off on the whole course of musical education that he
Yeah.
might have gotten in Leipzig, but he got a different education and a different political sensibility in Dresden.
Right.
So it's all there.
I know.
And you and I can know this stuff, but just taking politicians and taking people who cannot speak across the political divide to work such as Fidelio and have them really experience it. Le Nozze di Figaro, which is an opera
The
you know
Nozze di Figaro, of course,
is so
you have
political.
everything right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, opera for peace is the way I
Yeah.
see it. Yeah. Um, Now, I know that you have a lot of contact with students who come to you. How, in your view, do they experience the music? And I don't mean the words, but the music that they're studying. Do they feel it, or is it different now than when you were beginning?
Oh, I think they feel it. I mean, the students that I'm involved with are from 9 to 18, so that their feeling is increasing as they get into puberty. In the beginning, it's like, I don't want to practice. I want to be on my iPhone. So I wouldn't say there's a great emotional commitment there. But when
Hmm.
they get older, not all of them, but many of them, you can start to see their attachment to what they're doing and what they're creating and what they're singing about. And when you think of it, a young singer of 16 or 17, you know, do they really feel that yet? Do they know what the experience it is they're singing about, love or disappointment, or what opera is about? Or they probably don't, and that will come with their knowledge. But a few of them, you really see it. There's a wonderful young gal with a beautiful voice, and I see it in her face already at 15. Then there's another guy who plays the piano, he plays the saxophone, he sings, he's I see so much passion in him, but not in all the kids. But that develops, and that's with the older kids that I ever work with. And I don't work with many really. They'll occasionally say if I've sung something, would I help them with it? And I love doing it, and I love doing the master classes. Even in the mature singers, it's the one who has the emotion that gets you, even if the voice is less there. I heard these. I did some master classes in Minnesota, and oh my gosh, there was this one gal who just broke your heart. Just the throb in her voice came from somewhere very deep inside her. But I think also kids who are at that level are so preoccupied with their technique and their mastery of different things that they haven't afforded themselves yet the experience of absolutely feeling it. And in performing, I was always afraid of feeling too much a little bit, because I thought if I'm feeling it that much, it ain't traveling, it's not going across. So I have to be in control of it. It has to be there for sure in rehearsals or in preparation or even in performances, but I can't lose control of it. But kids too, today, they're so distracted.
Yeah.
They're so distracted, and I ache for them for that. I really do. There's something to be said for sitting still for 5 minutes and not doing anything. And they don't know that, and they're afraid of that. And the communication is so brief and clipped and ungracious.
Hmm.
And this is what they're being taught, because of phones and everything else. They're really not comfortable on a phone call. They're not offended, but irritated if you call them. They rather get their information from a a text message.
Because
And
I do a lot of broadcasting and podcasting and such. I always ask people to not read the transcript if there's a transcript, because you're not hearing my voice and the voice of my guests.
right,
Because there's something in the inflection, the softness, the volume of the person speaking that really very specifically tells us more about the word, whatever the word is.
right,
Pick a nice word, beautiful, but how beautiful looks on a page is very different from the way it's pronounced.
exactly. Yeah,
And
yeah,
we have to teach young people to get those messages too,
right.
or it's just a text.
It's a text. It's information, but not
Feeling.
information, but not emotion. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You remind me of something. James Levine, I had the privilege every month he gave me an hour for years so that I could ask him questions and learn from him. And I was asking him about difficulties in conducting operas that are very emotional. And he said the hardest thing for him to conduct is the last act of La Boheme, because he had to learn not to cry,
Right.
or he could not perform with his orchestra and his
Yeah.
singers those last very delicate, gorgeous, tragic pages that
Right.
Puccini wrote with his librettists. And it is hard. I mean, I'm not a singer, but I'm a speaker. And when I do a lot of public speaking, I know that sometimes people are listening to things I'm saying, and I may be tapping into something personal for me. I can tap into it to help bring across the message, but I don't want it to be about me.
Right.
Yeah. And
Right.
that's a challenge because so
Yeah.
much is about young people now. It's about themselves.
Right. Right.
It's about, what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what I'm seeing, what I'm clicking, what I'm liking, all that, all those
Right.
verbs.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. You're inspiring me now, Fred, because I'm going to take my grandkids to more and more opera,
Mm,
just and Puccini,
yeah.
and not because I do notice that their concentration is limited,
Yeah.
and it needs, so I'm so thrilled. I have a wonderful son-in-law, and I'm giving him as his Christmas present 2 tickets, a subscription to the symphony, because he used to
Mm,
go with his grandma a lot, and so he can take my Jan, my daughter, or one of his girls to the
hmm.
symphony, and just no matter who you are, if you sit in the symphony for 2 hours, something gets to you, whether it's high emotion or low emotion, or something gets to you. Something gets into your ears. It's like art. You and I know we probably can name 10 artists the of a certain period, of the Cubist period. Or kids
Hmm.
today can't do that.
Yeah.
They can't do it. You know, they can't name the
There's a
impressionists.
rapper named Ice Cube. I'm sure they mention him for Cubism.
I love it. Yeah, right. Um,
You remind me of something. In the beginning of December of this month, um, I took 3 nights and I went to Carnegie Hall each night in a row. And it's not that I will go to 3 nights of concerts always, but the Czech Philharmonic was in town.
yeah,
And, New Yorkers and not only San Franciscans and Chicagoans and people everywhere. If the Berlin Philharmonic or the Chicago Symphony or the Vienna Philharmonic or the Concertgebouw from Amsterdam come, people book everything because they want to see it.
right,
But the Czech Philharmonic came in and they had wonderful soloists, and Samuel Bishkov was the conductor. And it was all Czech music. And I decided that I needed to just have a break from my working life, my personal life, from the
Right.
world, and sit in Carnegie Hall, not even looking at the orchestra, but staring just at sort of the beige and tan and gold of Carnegie Hall and
Right.
let my mind wander. Because what's so particular about this Czech music is that its currency is melody. The melodies are extraordinary. And there
Yeah.
was something that happened that I felt so wonderful sitting there staring at the colors of Carnegie Hall and having that music wash over me and go into me without analyzing. I didn't analyze
Right.
how was Yo-Yo Ma playing the Dvorak cello concerto. I
Right.
didn't bother. I just listened. And where where did the maestro put the French horns on the stage? I didn't do any of that. I didn't even look. I
Yeah.
just really received the music as melody. And that was such a lesson to me because yes, I love songs, I love opera, I love things with words that I can connect to. But there was something about the abstraction of just having beautiful melody with no messages that I
Right.
was trying to discern. I felt so healthy. I felt so cleansed
That is
in
so
ways.
great.
And it was a lesson for me because, we do this for decades and we sort of put on our working hats and are the work part of our brain. I didn't do that. And it was miraculous. And I recommend it to other, not just Czech music, but there was something
But
about
anything.
melody.
Yeah.
I was not focusing on orchestration, syncopation, nothing,
Yeah.
just pure melody.
Right.
Richard Rodgers wrote beautiful melodies. There are people who create beautiful melodies, and if you love the melodies of whomever it is that you prefer,
Right.
Edvard Grieg, Tchaikovsky, you name it, um, Puccini, you just accept the melody without anything else.
Right.
And that's an abstraction, and I would love to teach that to young people, that they don't have to understand it.
Right.
And sometimes if we put the blinders on, we benefit more from the music than if we're working on all levels.
Exactly. I know. I very often shut my eyes in concerts because um I just find my mind wanders less. And if
Yeah.
otherwise I'll see someone's hat or think, oh my gosh, that doesn't look right up there. That might fall down, or something.
Mhm.
So yeah, that I think that's a wonderful idea. I'm going to see if I can organize that with my YMCO kids. Take them
Well, the
3 days.
problem for me is I don't think you have this problem, but when I'm spotted at a concert and then there's
Oh
social
yeah.
media, people say, I had my eyes shut. Fred Plotkin sleeping again at the Czech Philharmonic. Oh.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Yeah.
But the
Oh,
other thing that I do, and I learned this from a blind woman who came to the Met a lot, she always took her shoes off and felt the music with her feet. And
oh,
she sat
really?
close, even though she was blind and it didn't matter
Yeah.
what she saw on the stage, because she felt the orchestra and she felt the vibrations of the singers' voices. So
Right.
she sat in row B, and Levine knew her. And she always took her shoes. She came with her beautiful dog, and the dog was the most opera savvy dog in the world
Right.
because she heard every opera and was beautiful for Parsifal. 6 hours, didn't matter. The dog was
Right.
there. And this lady always took her shoes off. And
That's
she'd come with
interesting.
a companion who would help her put the shoes back on because she felt the music with her feet.
Right.
So in certain theaters, not all, I will take my shoes off
Yeah.
if I know that I'm going to feel something from the stage. It's remarkable.
Well, there's something magic too. I never forget when my daughter was doing Suzuki violin. And the first day she picked it up and, had at first she didn't have her bow, but then when she got a bow and played the open A string, and I saw her face change.
Mm,
And it was the vibrations
yeah,
going into her ears and her head and her body. And it was, because they can't wreck an open A string,
yeah.
and it was just I saw, and then she got interested. You know, her teacher used to have these like 3 hour long concerts
So the Zoom has
You've
frozen. There
frozen,
you are.
Fred.
Okay.
Yes,
So you said
hi.
she would have 3 hour long concerts. I didn't hear it
She used to
because
have 3-year-old concerts where every child play, everybody stop, oh, everybody stop. And you could see the fathers shriveling up in their chairs. I finally encouraged her. I said, just, maybe three of them together or a little bit shorter, maybe an hour would be good,
so I'm going to ask you as if you were a pharmacist or a physician. Name some music from any category, not only classical, not only opera, not only song lit, but any music that you think a listener, a child, let's say, but not only an adult, that it's fail safe that they will be moved by that music.
Um, I would say almost any song of Barbara Streisand.
Mm-hmm.
I would say another singer, Carly Simon.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the voice of Vittore de Los Angeles singing almost anything, but preferably Bohème. And for sure, I would say Nessun Dorma with Luciano.
Yeah.
For for sure. That would scare young children, but it would be, the athleticism of it would appeal to young men. That's such a good question, Fred. I might have to think about it a little more, but
Okay. But
I,
about Luciano,
yeah,
there is a viral YouTube video out there of a baby, a little girl. She can't be more than 8 months old, who is in her little baby buggy, whatever she's in. And there's a video on of Luciano singing Nessun Dorma. And at first, she sounds irritated. She doesn't quite understand what that is. But then her face locks in. And she said she doesn't know where it's coming from, but you can read the emotions on her face, 8 months old, I'm guessing, of what it did to her. She didn't cry, but she was just so profoundly moved. I'm getting goosebumps
right,
when I think about it, that she changed just in the 3 minutes of the
right,
song.
right,
And, for me, if I were to add some, I would say the second movement of almost any Mozart piano concerto
right,
will get me, especially the 23rd Kerschel 488, but all of them. There's just something about what Mozart did in the second movements that he felt had to express something that the first and third did not. It's
right,
kind of like, let's start with the cheerfulness of the first, then we're going to reveal our soul, and then we're going to resolve things again in most cases. And so all of those, the last, I would say the whole opera of Fidelio, but certainly the last 20 minutes of Fidelio is a knockout for me.
yeah,
But also the Prisoner's chorus, which is a very sad chorus, but nonetheless, it's gorgeous. The Pilgrim's chorus in Tannhäuser by Wagner. Those choruses that are gorgeous musically, but they're about something. And you don't have to know what the something is. You don't have to know the words, but
right.
something about the way Wagner and Beethoven match them. You know me, so I would say every note by Rossini and every other note by Berlioz.
I feel to a certain extent, Fred, that I'm a bit more simple-minded than you.
No,
Um,
no, 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 no.
no, it's true because Berlioz for me is so constructed that I admire it, but I don't feel it. You know, I feel
Well,
I feel the machinations, um, and I don't know Beethoven that well. I would go to anything of Mahler because
yes,
that rips my heart out.
yeah,
And Dvorak, you know,
yes. Melody.
melody. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, um, it's such a good question.
Well,
I
not to
just
pay a
love it. I
compliment to a
love it.
friend, but I will say you sang Berlioz incredibly well. And
I
I
love
was
singing it.
deeply moved.
I mean,
Yeah,
musically, it's so musically and vocally challenging.
yeah,
And I love the French and I love the stories. I just feel that, sometimes it's why I sort of love the Nuit d'été, because they're
right.
the only one where he gets really complicated is the Soulève ta paupière. No, not that one. The other one, Ma belle amie est morte. And I think, okay. But this, that I love. Um, and I don't know Troyen at all. I wish I'd learned Troyen, not for me,
Oh,
but just to hear for myself, because
do it.
I've admired Susie in it, and I've admired Janet Baker in it, and
Yeah, many, many. Les Troyens is often my favorite opera. I
really.
don't have a favorite opera, but it's often,
Now
it's certainly the top five.
for a New Year's present, I'm no, big present to you, but to myself, I'm going to listen to Troyen. You know,
Um, it's one of those things that really is about everything.
right?
And he's the only composer I refer to by his first name. I call him Hector because I feel very close to him in
Hector.
ways that, I don't. I mean, I love Rossini. I love Verdi
Yeah,
as my hero, but there's just something about Hector that I feel very deeply. His
yeah.
orchestration, my heartbeat is his heartbeat, and there's something about the last 20 minutes of Les Troyens. Get the Met video with
Okay.
Domingo Troyanos and Norman.
Well, I love Tatiana so
I
much. Yeah,
worked
I
on that
will.
show. Yeah,
Okay. Also, Fred, I think obviously your influence, just as I'm influenced differently after you're explaining about the wonderful poetess in Joe's piece. It makes a huge difference knowing about their background. I mean, I used to love reading about Massenet, that when he went after one of his operas, he went to the cassa, and he just filled his coffers with all the money. And
yeah.
there's a little bit of part of some of his music, while I treasure Everett and have the most fun of my life singing it. There's a little bit that's probably money bound, or
Yeah, but
you could feel that he got rich off certain things.
he liked California girls too.
Yes.
You know
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Sybil Sanderson, I think her name was,
Right.
went topless, 150 years ago in one of his operas. But one of his Massenet's great works that I think is completely underappreciated. Talk about a blackout. His last opera was about Cleopatra, and it's a gorgeous,
Is
gorgeous
it?
opera. Great role
Yeah.
for mezzo. It's my French accent is terrible, but j'ai bu le not poisson, poison, the French. In other words, poison, not fish.
Poison, not fish. Yes.
Poison.
Yeah.
um, and it's an extraordinary opera with a wonderful closing scene.
Yeah.
And no one does Mustang's Cleopatra. They do a lot of
What?
his other works,
Yeah.
but
Well, Matthew Epstein, my wonderful first manager,
yep,
he's responsible for getting Chauvin out of the
yeah,
trunk. You
right.
know, it's I don't think he's too old to put him to work on Cleopatra.
No, we're going to call Matthew now, and
Call him right now. Call him
I
right
can think of a
now.
couple of mezzos that would immediately put in the role, and that would be it.
Exactly. He'll have it cast within an hour.
It's true. But seriously, this is the point for the likes of you and me, but not just us, but all music lovers and opera lovers and art lovers, that yes, we can have our first approach to a composer or to a work, but then we can live with these works. And I'm certain there are works that you live with in a particular way. One of the ones that I live with is Les Troyens.
Yeah.
I go back to and study and think about and care about. In the closing scene, the irony, the sadness that Didon has sacrificed for her people, and then in so doing, she has cost them their freedom. And it's an extraordinary scene.
Yeah.
Wagner never wrote a scene like that.
Right.
And he wrote great scenes, but there's just something about this that is so remarkable because it's classical in the sense that Berlioz loved the classics, loved ancient history, but modern, um, shocking on the stage because of the way Didon, as played by Troyanos or Susan Graham or many other artists, it's just
Yeah.
heart wrenching, and it's really beautiful.
I'm
Um, yeah.
I'm turning it on as soon as we go off the air.
So I'm going to ask you to give me a work to study and listen to in 2025, apart from Crimson Roses, which I am
Okay. You
enjoying.
know what? I would love you to get to know. I would love you to get to know Jake Heggie's intelligence.
The new opera called Intelligence.
Yeah.
Yes,
His
not I
his
know Jake Heggie's Intelligence. We're friends, but he
yeah,
wrote an opera called Intelligence. I know
intelligence.
that.
I would love to you to get to know it because I think it's one of his best work. I mean, I love Dead Man Walking more
Yeah.
than life. And I love everything else he's done, but this this is something very special. And it's I I don't have the musical background to say it's the best thing he's written. I just think it's an extraordinary story, extraordinarily crafted by he and Gene. Um, and
Is that Gene
actually,
Shear?
Gene Shear. And
Yeah.
there's an element in its presentation which you won't hear when you just listen to it, but that there was a very subtle dance move
Hmm.
in every act that was, I thought, hypnotizing and never interfering. And there's fabulous singing in it. Some of the best singing I've heard in a long, long time. I mean, and I hear great singing all the time.
Yeah,
I'd love you to get to know that piece, and I'd love to know what you think of it.
I will.
You
Is
know,
there a
uh,
video or is it only on audio or should I go to the score
I
first?
don't know. I'll ask Jake, and I'll let you know.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure HGO filmed it.
Okay, Houston
I'm
Grand
pretty
Opera.
sure they did, but I'll find out from Jake, and I will get back to you immediately.
So this leads to a question that I didn't think to ask you an hour ago. Um, HGO, Houston Grand Opera. I have been to most of the great opera companies of the world, except for four. Glyndebourne. I've worked for Glyndebourne, but I've never attended a performance there, but I've done work for them from afar. Um, I've been to the Bolshoi in Moscow, but only for ballet, not opera. I have never been to the Sydney Opera. I was invited, but that was 9/11, and I turned down my work offer because I felt I had to be here in New York at the end of 2001. And I've never been to the Houston Grand Opera, which I know is a wonderful company
It is a wonderful
that
company.
has produced more new works practically than any other. Patrick Summers and everyone who's been there. I'm forgetting his name now suddenly. The gentleman who was David Gockley, for
David,
many,
oh,
many
wonderful
years.
David. Yeah.
And he's the one who inspired all of this new opera. Um, I've never been. So my question is, what great opera house in the world have you not been to or never sang in that you would like to have sung in
Oh my
or
gosh.
operated?
Um, well, I never sang in the Sydney Opera House, but I did go walk through it when
Hmm.
it was first built, and I was on a tour with, what is her name? Anna Russell. Do you remember the comedian? And she
Anna
was
Russell, as in, um, let me tell you the story of the Rhine.
right, right. So it was hysterical. She was so funny. Anyway, what great opera house. I don't think I ever sang in the Fenice in
Ah,
Venice. La Fenice. I sang in the big hall there.
yeah,
Oh no, I sang in a church.
yeah,
I never sang at La Fenice, and I would just like to see them because they're so beautiful. You know,
yes.
like I feel so strongly right now in my life. I told my daughter and granddaughters yesterday. I said, how would you like to go to Paris for Christmas?
Hmm.
Because I'm dying to see Notre Dame.
Yes.
I'm just dying, nothing about opera, just, you know, I I went by there when I was last in Paris and it was getting closer and closer. And I lived right by Notre Dame for a long time. And anyway, they can't go. We're not going now, but we're going next summer. Um,
Good.
and no, I kind of feel I've had my glory, and I mean I've been lucky enough, not had my glory, but I've been in glorious houses, and
Yeah.
there's nothing else. I've been in places I never thought I would be. But you should go to Glyndebourne.
I want to. I mean, I
Yeah,
have a very close relationship with them,
right. I
and
know.
I've done work for them from afar. I've just
Yeah,
never been to Glyndebourne,
yeah,
um, yet. But and I've never been to Houston. I really do want to go there.
yeah.
But I can help you go to La Fenice. If you want to do
Okay,
that, I can make it happen.
okay.
All right?
I took
Because
my family to Italy last summer, and we were outside of Florence, and I had the
yeah,
time of my life.
because you may not know this, in college I was a Venetian history major. And the reason for that is that although opera was not born in Venice, it was born in Florence, the
Right.
first great operatic capital was Venice. So I decided, I was living in Bologna and could get to Venice in 2 hours, that I would study Venetian history there and opera in Bologna and then Milan. And we still think of Venice as tourist capital and so on, but just the fact, and I know the number, in the first century of opera, they created 388 new operas in Venice. No other city, not Milan, no other city,
That's pretty
not
good.
Paris, has
Yeah.
created 388 new operas. And they built 17 theaters for opera. And La Fenice was not one of them. La Fenice came later, it came in 1792, and it was the replacement for a theater that burned down because La
Right.
Fenice means the phoenix, and it
Right.
rose from the ashes of the previous theater. But there was a fire there around 1998 or 99, but they had in the Venetian archives every documentation of the design of the seats, of everything, and it was rebuilt as it was, but with a better stage house and safer fire measures and so on. But they're having a wonderful resurgence there now. It was not great
They
for a number of
are.
years,
Oh,
but
I that
between
that
that
gives me so much joy.
and the
Yeah.
Teatro Malibran, which they've taken over and they have
Yeah.
restored, it means they're doing opera in two theaters in a city of 50,000 people with many
Right.
tourists, but a city
Right.
of 50,000 people. And so our friend Gregory Kunda did both the Rossini and the Verdi Otello there,
He did
which
the
was,
the Rossini Otello. Yeah.
and then the Verdi.
Yeah.
And I
Wow.
went to a fantastic performance a few years ago of Semidamide in the Fenice, conducted by Riccardo Frizza.
Yeah.
And they manage in that beautiful theater of 700 seats to create a sound and aura that does not feel touristic. It does not feel like it's Disney World at the opera. It
Right. Right.
really feels like you're still at the opera. And you arrive there, and you arrive by gondola, you arrive on foot, you enter the theater. The lobby is not particularly impressive, but then when you go up the steps and you enter the theater, it is just dazzling.
Oh,
And Regina Resnick worked there a lot, Marilyn Horne worked there a lot,
right.
and both of them loved that theater because of what it contains as its history. Because so many operas premiered there. Verdi had Simone Boccanegra, La Traviata, Rigoletto premiered in that theater. Also Attila. Do you know the story of
Yeah.
Attila and why it premiered in Venice? Verdi was outraged that the Austrians built a bridge from the mainland to the old city of Venice, destroying a neighborhood and building a railway station there. Because before that, Venice lived on its islands, 118 islands, away from the mainland, and it was its
Right.
own wonderful city. But Verdi in 1846, when this was built, was outraged. So he proposed an opera called Attila about Attila the Hun, with the Austrians being perceived as the Huns
The
coming in and
Huns.
invading. And the most famous line in the opera is sung by, I believe his name is Ezio, and he's a Roman general. And he says, Avrai tu l'universo, resti l'Italia me. You may have the universe, but let Italy be mine.
Right.
And that's my motto. And when the Venetian audience heard that in 1846, they exploded in cheers.
Right.
And it helped begin to drive the Austrians out of Venice, that opera.
I'm watching a film series now called The Empress. It's in German,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and it's exactly about that. With pleading with Napoleon to somehow intervene, but the Austrians are just about to spar off with the
Yep.
Italy. Yeah, and it's
Napoleon
beautifully done.
Napoleon called the Piazza San Marco the greatest drawing room in Europe.
He did. I think he had a sense of humor.
He did. A short one, but it was
A short one, yes, a specific one. Yeah.
There is so much I would love to talk to you about. Did I leave anything out that you would like to talk about?
No, just I've had a wonderful Christmas, and my best Christmas present is talking to you. So I thank you with all my heart. And I love your interest in every part of everything. I just really, I treasure it. It's so important. It's so important to the business. It's so important to the artists. It's so important to music. So keep on trekking, Fred, okay?
Well, I think in my defense, I could say I really care.
You do.
I genuinely
I know.
care.
And you know what? You know what? Perhaps caring is becoming obsolete.
Yeah.
And caring is the ball game. You
have to be passionate, not fanatical, not gossipy, not mean, but just allow your inspiration, whether it's Czech melodies, whether it's a Verdi opera, whatever it is, whether it's baseball, which I kind of love, whatever it is, allow yourself to really be passionate about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then other people will feel included or interested. And even if that's not their passion, you can encourage their passions. I have a student now who he and I are, he's Italian, but he's here in New York, are completely different people, except for the fact that we're very passionate about our topics. And he's a scientist, an environmentalist, and so deep into what he does that he lives every moment in an elevated way. And a lot of people might say, well, that gets tiring. No, it doesn't. It's very exciting.
And also, I'm caring. I think young people are afraid of caring. When you care of someone who's ill, you're afraid that it's going to consume all your time and it's going to be boring and it's going to be this. The times that I have cared for someone have been some of the most magic times ever. And the times I've seen friends of mine care for either a loved one or, a husband or a parent, they have gotten more out of it than anyone else can imagine. And you don't know that until you do it.
Yeah.
I feel it from my daughters. They really care about me in deep and magic ways. And it just fills me up. It just absolutely fills me up. And it's good for them because their kids see them doing it. It's a process that benefits everyone around them. It has never been a negative, never. Only on film or television sometimes, but I have never seen it in a personal experience, So thank you for caring.
It's heightened experience in a good way.
Yeah.
When I've been a caregiver, people have asked me about the difficulty. Yes, it can be. I have regretted nothing of that. On the contrary, the gift. And I learn. Michelangelo, one of my heroes, at the age of 82, he was doing a drawing and trying to figure out the design for a particular painting he was going to do of a human form. And when he finally got to it after many sketches, he wrote on the bottom, Ancora imparo. I'm still learning at the age of 82.
Yeah.
And that, to me, if I am learning, I'm growing. And
Right.
I think what I wish for you, of course, my dear, but also the world, if I can send a wish out to the world, is that we make 2025 a year about learning and about listening to each other
Listening and
rather
learning.
than
It's so much more interesting. You're
yeah.
right. Bless you.
Like a bless you too.
Happy
Thank you
New
for being
Year.
my only return
I'm
guest.
so honored. I can't tell you. I think if I could do it, I would jump up and click my heels, but I'm not going to risk it.
Don't risk it. I
Okay.
didn't see your dog this time. I heard your dog.
She's asleep over there.
Well, that's okay. Because last
She
time
you
she came
heard
for a
you heard
visit
her a
during our
little bit. Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
So, Frederica von Stade, happy 2025. I wish you all the joys and all the caring that you can muster and experience from others. And, I started by saying that you are a beloved artist. Beloved is a real word. It means that you are loved. Genuinely, you have made millions of people happy. And what's not to love about that?
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
Fred.
my dear.
Thank you for being so good to me. Thank you.
I will talk to you soon.
Okay. Bless you.
Thank you.